This is an audio podcast, not a video podcast, not a shiny glasses podcast.
Chip Truth Chummer, slot and or run.
Oh, thank you for giving me the option of and or running.
Yes, it's not a binary, slot and run.
Welcome, and well met to the Jaunty Mantis podcast. This is a podcast about tabletop role-playing games and the people who play it, and those people who play it. One of them is it's me, Matty. I'm your co-host, and the other one is Jesse.
It's me, Jesse. I'm gonna win.
There you go. And this is a podcast full of creative questions for curious gamers. And welcome back to season 3. Season 3, where we're doing reviews, in-depth deep dives, or surface scannings of books. I don't know. Jesse, I fucked that up. What are
Yeah,
we
I
doing
think
for season 3?
we're scooting on our butts down carpeted stairs. That's the metaphor for the depth of what we're going into here. And I do want to say, I realized it's exciting. As of this recording last week, the first of these actually went live on the feed. And in that one, I made a crack about giving it all the mantises a review system. I realize we have not kept up. So
Well,
I'm hoping to bring
yeah.
back the mantises scale.
Yeah, I've got a couple of mantises for this book. The book we have for you in this episode is none other than Shadowrun Anarchy.
Slot and run, chummers.
That's right. And I bought both the French and English version of this. I bought the French version accidentally, and it took me about an hour to figure out that it was not the book I was looking for because I was like, isn't this cool? It's in another language.
That's why I took French in high school, so I could read Shadowrun Anarchy in the original French.
In its original text.
Yes.
No, it took me an hour to realize because I was trying to do three things at once, and I was like, I'll just look at it. I'll just look at the book while I'm on this call for work, and I think it speaks to how cool this book is. That even though it was in French, I was like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I know the job of a cover for an RPG is to sell it, but with Shadowrun, like the cover of this book is like, I want to be that fucking dude in his weird fucking like Ronin robots he's got with him. He's some kind of elf with samurai swords. I don't know. It's Shadowrun.
I mean, it's not just the cover, it's basically all the artwork in this book. I hate to say it at this point in the episode, but the artwork I think is one of the best things in this book. It's really, really good, and it's made with love. And I'm hoping we can get more into that made with love aspect that this game is for Shadowrun Anarchy. But we're gonna follow our workflow, or at least we're gonna tell you we're gonna follow our workflow, and then not follow our workflow, which is we're gonna
We,
do a brief overview.
I was just going to say to the audience, we owe you nothing.
That's right. That's right. This podcast is punk fucking rock. We have no Patreon. We don't care if you 5-star rate us, even though we said so in a previous episode.
I
We
kind
don't
of
really
care.
Jesse cares. I don't care.
I'm a
Uh,
sellout.
okay. Well, you heard it here first. Jesse is a sellout. Finally, that thing I've been saying behind your back for 30 years, I can finally say to your face over Zoom.
I'm sorry, the mean streets of Seattle in the year 2079 were just too much for me, and I had to get that corpo paycheck to get those cred sticks in my pocket. It just made sense.
That's true. I think to our younger selves, we are both sellouts because you are Corpo Jesse and I am Corpo Matty.
Hooray! Okay, this is off topic. I've been listening to this book of essays by Chuck Klosterman called The 90s because it's on Spotify with my premium. They have audiobooks. It's great for me. It's like a podcast that requires a much longer attention span. So it's like hardcore history. Uh, But the whole thing about selling out is just like the whole idea of doing something for commercial purposes is the thing that was antithetical to the 90s generation, and that informs us. And so we've sold out. But I don't think that the young people of today would consider us having sold out because we chose to do something so we were not hungry.
Yeah, but I'm not hungry. I eat very well, and I've got a lot on my role-playing game plate. And Anarchy is this. What are we at? The fourth course in this meal? The third? What episode is this?
I think this is six.
This is six. Holy shit! Well, we are in, folks. Tuck in. Get ready.
We've done half of it. We've halfway made it.
Wow, we've halfway made it.
Shadowrun
Yes.
is a game that is a mashup of traditional fantasy role-playing game tropes and the cyberpunk genre. And if you don't immediately think that concept is awesome, there is something fundamentally wrong with you. Um, or you just have more discerning tastes and like, okay, this is one of those ones. This is like Star Wars. It wormed its way into my brain when I was like 12. So I'm gonna be unable to think of it as anything other than super cool until the
hmm
day I die.
hmm If you picture young Jesse and young Matty discovering Shadowrun as children and being like, somebody put my chocolate in my peanut butter. It's got dwarves and elves and magic, and then it's got cool cyberpunk science fiction bullshit. And somebody put those things together. Like, this blew our minds as kids. I don't know if any grognard gamers are willing to admit that, but for me, Shadowrun, I was just playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I came across Shadowrun, and I was like, it's the only time in my life I contemplated stealing something because I didn't have enough money to buy it. That's okay. I borrowed some money from my brother and bought it. But like as a kid, this book, this concept just like destroyed my brain.
I have in my desk drawer a gang patch
Oh wow, the Halloweeners
for the
with a
Halloweeners.
flaming jack-o'-lantern.
Yes, one of the street gangs of Seattle
Nice.
in the dark future. Okay, so we like the setting a lot. I think that may be pretty clear to our listeners. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Shadowrun, traditionally, what would you say is the level of complexity of the mechanics?
I would say it's a high complexity depending on what you are using exactly. So if you're using magic, the complexity is higher than normal. And if you're trying to use a keytar to hack into a bank and get into the matrix, like then it's like fuck you, go play
Yeah,
something else. It's so complicated, it's so needlessly complicated. But that's an older version of Shadowrun.
and if you're also doing a rigger who's piloting drones and engaging in electronic warfare, ECM and ECCM, it can also get kind of complicated. And if you have a bunch of cyberware running your guns and like people complain about the grappling rules in previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons, but I'll
Yeah.
say this for those. I could get a grasp on them. I've never fully understood the crunchy salsa effect, which is a rule in Shadowrun in multiple books that basically is like this. If you throw a grenade into the room, if the force of the blast does not blow the walls out, it will rebound back into the room, doing more damage, and continue to do so, going back and forth until all the force is depleted or the wall is too damaged and blows out. And this is called the chunky salsa effect.
That's right. And it's called that in the book, which is
Hmm.
another reason. Like you have to imagine, like to a nerd child such as myself, like D&D was something that like you kept to yourself. I got picked on in school for being into nerd shit back then. And like in a weird way, like Shadowrun just seemed like the cool role-playing game to me, and the fact that they like called it chunky salsa and then described it much in the same way that Jesse just did was like super appealing to me as a child gamer. I was just like, wow, these
I
guys are
could
so
do things
cool.
like they did in RoboCop.
Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah.
But as older gamers, the complexity of the rules of traditional Shadowrun, which is up to it's what is it now? It's Shadowrun Sixth World is the mainstream one that's out now, which is basically sixth edition Shadowrun. I
Hmm.
started playing in second edition. I have owned the core rulebook for every edition since second. Um, Fourth edition, I think I had almost the entire core book line because they always do core book. Here's the magic book. Here's the gun book. Here's the
Hmm.
matrix book. They always add all these supplements to them. It's a great business model. Good for you, FASA, WizKids, whoever owns it today. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't even remember which
Pops,
version I got into
what was the
originally.
cover?
I'm trying to look it up online. I think it might have been the 1990. It's either the 92 or the 98 version.
Was it in someone that looked to be an American Indian with a Uzi and gray pants
It's
and an
the
elf with a hand up while
yes.
elf is
That's
hacking into a computer?
yes.
That is second edition.
Yes. Shadowrun second edition. Yeah. It was the forbidden fruit that my young mind was looking for.
I don't think in pictures. I am not a visual thinker. I can call that cover into my mind
Yeah.
instantly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, I think we've kind of belabored the point on this. We love Shadowrun, but it can be a little bit difficult to play at times.
Yeah.
Enter Shadowrun Anarchy, an alternate, what does it say on the cover? Alternate rules?
Alternate rule set.
Yeah, an alternate rule set for Shadowrun. Supposedly fully compatible with all of its other books for fifth edition.
Maybe sixth edition, because I think there are several references in this book to nope, it's fifth edition. Anarchy in fifth edition is a chapter 197. You were right. Yep.
Cool. So, to finish our brief overview that hasn't been brief, is that Shadowrun Anarchy is a rules light story game version of Shadowrun that basically simplifies down all of the excess dice pool stuff while keeping the same sort of roll a pool of six-sided dice. Five and sixes are successes, but simplifies it a way down and adds a very 2016 understanding of what a story game is to it. So
Hmm.
2016, this puts it contemporary with Fate, 3 years after Fate.
Okay. Interesting.
Um, kind of sort of, I think that's extemporaneous with Apocalypse World.
Okay.
So I don't know that Apocalypse World is informing it, but it's a story-based mechanic. Uh, well, let's get into why it matters.
That is kind of why it matters, though. That's what I thought
Yeah,
you were doing. Is
yeah.
like,
Sorry, I'm doing why it matters. Because it gives you a story game version of Shadowrun, which is an amazing setting and an awesome world, and now you can play it. It has a really interesting system, and I can't remember the game they took it from, but it was like Cosmic Patrol or something.
okay.
Uh, it's their own story-based system, and it basically has you take turns doing narrations. What
Right.
did you think about that?
Um, well, for like first I'd like to go into why it matters for me because and I'm sure Jesse could speak to this much better than I could. But my limited experience with role-playing games in general, coming mostly from Dungeons and Dragons, even into my later years here. But like why it matters to me is because it shows that you can have multiple versions of the same basic idea. And I think that's really cool. And it makes me so like, what if there was a story game version of Dungeons and Dragons? What if there was a story game version of Rips? What if there was a story game version of, whatever? What if there was a miniatures war game of Vampire the Masquerade or something like that? Maybe there is, I don't know. But my point is like I like the idea of having an IP and a setting and that's static or dedicated to the core essentials of the game and then you're like, there's a story game version, and then there's this other version, the fifth edition version or the sixth edition version or whatever. There's multiple ways to make this universe work at your table. And I think
Yeah,
that's really, really fucking cool.
that's I have two thoughts on that. One, I think as the model becomes increasingly moving away from publishing these actual hardbound books, which makes me sad, but I will say my PDF collection is even more massive than my actual physical book collection. So I guess it doesn't make me that sad. It's the reason I bought an iPad, for reading my PDFs at bedtime on my iPad with the glowing screen. Uh, but also too that I'm doing a Coursera course right now to for the Google Data Analytics certification. Because I want to do more data analysis stuff in my professional life because numbers are neat. And I have a degree in poetry, so they're very strange and exotic to me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and in this course, they have the video has a transcript at the bottom that moves along showing you what it says. But after the video, they'll also have a reading that goes over the same information, but in a style formatted for reading. So it's like the same core body of information or ideas, but the all these different ways that you can engage with it depending on your personal style and preference.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I think there are people have made games that are story game like. I mean, there's a story game like thing that is kind of like D&D
Mm-hmm.
because we both love Dungeon World. Uh,
Yep.
but if Wizards did
Mm-hmm.
like an official thing, I
Right.
don't know, maybe some merit to it.
I mean, to also to kind of piggyback on your question by asking a follow-up question to your question, because I think this is an important thing to kind of work our way through. Is there's a lot of gamers who don't like story games because there isn't enough of an actual game in it, or it's not, they don't consider it a game. When I was originally looking up stuff about Shadowrun Anarchy, I found this to be like, just to kind of summarize people's reactions to it online as I'm reading through stuff. There's people that say like, normally I wouldn't get into this because I don't like story games because there's no actual game in story games. And I mean, like, what is your reaction to that? Like, I mean, that's obviously very important to a lot of gamers in our industry. And to a certain extent, I kind of agree with them. There should be a substantial core game element, to counterbalance the heavy story features of it. But what is your reaction to that?
I mean, I think this is going to be kind of a hot take. That's a very broad question that touches on a lot of themes that are important to me. Um, and I need to circle back to my what do you think about the narration? Because this is the thing I read as the critique. But I think if you take, like, there's a chance of failure. I think people have a perception that the failure the dice suggest in a more quote unquote simulationist game like
Mm-hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons is actually still just GM fiat at the end of the day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it is basically a story game. Like, there might be more crunch for how you can move, but you're still making moves. If I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to borrow a phrase from Apocalypse World, you're still making moves necessary to the genre. They're just explicit about what they are in a story game. So I think I understand where the hesitancy comes from because it seems like you're not actually playing as much of a game as telling a story, but there are mechanics and there are rules
Mm-hmm.
like to it, which to me are the game elements that makes it a game. So like I get why people are nervous about it. It takes a different skill set because it's not just reading the book and mastering the system. It's being like, what's the cool story thing? And not everybody's comfortable free-forming improv one-upping with while being celebrated for your friends when you one-up them like a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, like, one of the things, Anarchy, the narrations. What did you think of the narrations? Because there's a thing this game in its default state asks you to do that I think is really, really hard for a lot of people who've come from more traditional RPGs or even other story games. I think
Describe
it would
what
be
that
hard
is.
for me to do, actually. So, what do you think about narrations?
Describe it for the listener.
So, in narrations, you go round robin around the table, and each player narrates what's happening, not just to their PC, but the environment as well. And there is a resource that you get called plot points. And the game works better when, as a player, you use a plot point to bring in more bad guys to fuck up your own run.
Yeah. I love this conceptually. This is kind of what I always hoped role-playing games would be, more of a free form taking license with other people's characters to a certain extent, the environment, the threats, and just letting it roll and see how it plays out. But there's a part of me that's like deeply afraid of this as well, because
Yeah.
I'm like, who's gonna do this? Who's actually gonna do this the way it's supposed to go? You know what I mean? Like hardcore story gamers will, but is your typical TTRPG gamer going to be able to pull this off? And with with no judgment towards any other type of gamer, I don't know. I'd have to play this and see it in action. I've only like read this book for for this episode. Conceptually, this seems like the coolest fucking thing in the world. Are you kidding me? Like, I would love to have a field day with like adding all sorts of details, but I also GM. You know what I mean?
So you
My
get a bunch of
favorite,
GMs to play this.
yeah, my favorite part of some of our group's games have been when somebody just takes license with another person's character and the other person goes, well, at first you say something like, if that's all right, and the other person goes, no, go, totally, yeah, that's completely what I would do. Like, those are some of my favorite parts. Like, the one of the first times I noticed this happening, and this is going to go way back, is I think it was me who ran just like a one shot for our old group where it was like you and me and Meredith and Mike. That was our group. And you guys were like lizard men because lizard men is a thing that comes up for us, or like some sort of like savage animal man kind of thing, barbarians. And like the group is like discovered this creature. It's a huge threat to their community. They're trying to neutralize it. Every like the I think it was your character had the creature pinned down, and then it was Mike's turn next, and he was like, my character just passes my spear over Jesse's shoulder for him to grab on it and strike. And you had already taken your attack, right? This was third edition Dungeons and Dragons, probably. There was no rule for Mike giving his attack action to Jesse. But like that's what Mike wanted to do to further the story, and it made it so fucking cinematic and cool. I'm not doing justice in the way that I'm describing it. Like he described how it happened, and it was like one of my favorite moments in all the games we've ever had because it just like a light bulb went off for me about what gaming could be. You know what I mean? And I kind of feel like what you just described and what's in this book would enable that to happen. And I'm not just scared of it for gamers. I'm scared of it because like you're essentially giving me my drug like with a fire hose,
Yeah.
right? And I'm afraid of that, to be perfectly honest with you.
I mean, you could do, yeah, the narrating even in combat, like as it goes around in turns, because there's no they have an optional initiative system. They have a couple things like if you want to play this more traditionally, we can, but here's the narration system. So like it's not a knock against them. They give you like it's literally a paragraph that you need to read to do it the normal way. Um, but it could be so cinematic in its scope.
Hmm.
Like if you're thinking about like, someone firing their Ares Predator like through the darkened office complex with sheafs of paper erupting and like filling the air with a white blizzard. Okay, your narration, what are you doing?
Yeah, and then you have another player like what does basically describing how there's somebody after hours who got caught, in the in the melee of gunfire or whatever,
Yeah.
and he's like picked up the phone and is calling security,
He's
you
cowering
know.
under his desk, like pressing the panic button on his like
Yeah.
comm link again and again. Yeah.
Do you realize like what that would do to me as a player? That I
Uh-huh.
have that I have not just the ability but the encouragement of this game to do shit like that.
You have the responsibility to do shit like that in this game.
Yeah. Like that's frightening. With great power comes great responsibility, Jesse. Like I would probably do some fucking diehard shit and have that like that fucking after hours corporate drone, like, wife and a family and all that shit. And it's just like, he calls security and then the next call he makes is to his wife.
Yeah, no, yes. Make there be real consequences to wanton violence in Shadowrun. That elevates the game. Like,
Yeah,
um, so yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. It matters because it's an interesting idea of ways to do things. I feel that the general nature of this hobby and the arc of these games sort of spoil this, but if you can get into the groove, because I have a revelation. I
oh,
have both run this and played it.
oh, wow.
It
And
it's been like it's been 8 or 9 years. I
so
guess it
give me
couldn't
everything
possibly
in
be
exact
9 years. It's
details.
been 7 or 8 years. Um, no, we had a cool combat by the edge of Lake Ontario, like with a bunch of free spirits, like that were yeah, ruining our run as we're trying to like yeah, it was awesome. Like it was really cool. The narration thing was stumbly at first. People picked it up really fast. Um, the plot point system worked fairly elegant. The rules are easy to explain. Uh, I like it. I thought I did actually worked. It took two passes around the table before people
Interesting.
started clicking. But
And
I was blessed to have a pretty great group.
well, you do tend to attract great groups. Um, even though I'm having trouble vocalizing great groups, even though I'm having trouble vocalizing that, it's the truth. It's one of your gamer talents.
Yeah, I do have grape roops. It's true.
Yeah. So that's what you do.
Yeah.
Is that also why it's cool? Because I have a
No,
why I have I mean there's so many things in this book as to why it's cool.
the art's cool. Okay, can you think of other RPGs that have a full-on lexicon of their own,
Exactly. This is what I was alluding to earlier. Go ahead.
like their own slang? And
Mm-hmm.
and also I got into this book at a time when I was my burgeoning interest in language and linguistics that would eventually see me get a degree of poetry was just starting to take off. And so when I read Clockwork Orange, I like memorized the lexicon in the back and like so I'm shoving my hands in my devachkas. And I read the Shadowrun one. I was like, oh, I'm learning a whole bunch of this. And you know what? Chip truth, chummer.
Mm-hmm.
Chip truth. Uh, Geek the Mage. Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know, like all kinds of stuff. Um, yeah, I love it. I love that that's there, but I don't think if I had found Shadowrun later as an adult, I would have bothered to learn this. And this is the other thing that makes it
Interesting.
hard for me to teach people Shadowrun because I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to turn it off. The moment we're on the rain-slicked lit streets of Seattle in the 2070s, it's just, yeah, all that stuff comes out.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was alluding to with this game being made with love. This game is not just a story game for Shadowrun, it's also a love letter to Shadowrun in a certain way. And I know that's kind of become my catchphrase with a lot of things we talk about, but the characters in the artwork, correct me if I'm wrong, are characters that you have seen in other books for this game in past editions.
Yeah, a huge chunk of this book.
Hmm.
I will say the picture, it's really hard not to see it, but on page 11, I just want to say Stone Cold Steve Orkston. Um,
Yeah.
but a lot of the characters. So sorry, here's another thing about the layout of this book that I have to give you context, dear listener, for. There's a huge chunk that's pre-made characters, and there's a huge chunk that's one-page run briefs.
Hmm.
Like, so what you are supposed to do when you play, because the rules are so simple, everybody picks a pre-con character, whoever's the GM picks a run that they're doing. GM reads the one-page run description, gives some information about the run to the players, and then you go and start the narration turn sequence, just going and going and seeing where it leads.
Hmm.
So a lot of these characters are characters from novels or from starter sets, like the 5e starter set. A bunch of these characters are people from that. They're people I was familiar with from other parts in the game. Koi Dog is in the 5e starter set for regular Shadowrun. Koi Dog is an elf street shaman. So
Hmm. Hmm.
cool, cool.
And I swear to God, I'm recognizing characters that are from going all the way back to second edition as well, that have been in, the main book or one of the many source books. I've correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the people who made this book also love Shadowrun. And
Hmm.
I think that's a huge, huge part of why this works for me, because I think the story elements are cool enough, but as somebody who played Shadowrun a decent amount in his youth and fell in love with the idea of it as a child, there's a part of me that just got very sentimental just looking at the artwork in this book. It just evoked the kind of nostalgia, that I love. And one of the cool parts about this book is those pre-made characters. I feel like every role-playing game should do this. I feel like every role-playing game should have a section where they have just like a 1 or 2 pages, devoted strictly to a character in this setting as an example character that you could just play right out of the book or use in an adventure. My One of my favorite parts of this book is that pre-made characters section, because
Yeah,
the characters are so cool and described so well. It's like I want to play all of them.
they've got some nice throw because as you said, the love letter to Shadowrun, some nice throwbacks to first edition Shadowrun with Reese Frenzy, the orc rocker, and Razzle Dazzle, the orc reporter. So like in first
Yes.
edition Shadowrun, like they never really did character classes. You sort of just built, but
Hmm.
there was like a rocker archetype and there was a reporter archetype because if you were going to be punk, of course you had to play punk rock music and somebody had to like report on the malfeasance of the corpse. And then very quickly as the 90s rolled on and they realized what mega corporations were actually going to be like, they're like, oh yeah, reporting and rock music aren't actually going to do anything. So let's make people who can shoot these guys. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It takes nothing to get going. You can just go.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such an interesting element to keep in a story game, because pick up pick and play characters are more evocative of like Hero Quest. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you would expect pick up and play characters out of like not a story game, like a more out of the box game where it's like, hey everybody, we're gonna play a role playing game, and like, here's your characters to choose from, and I thought it was such a weird um move to just put not just put in 5 pre-generated characters. There's a lot of them, you know.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. Here's the thing that I want to say. Well, on that, I can think of two other games that give you pre-made characters.
Okay.
Marvel Heroic, the Marvel RPG before the current one that's out when Margaret Weis's studio was running it that uses the Cortex system,
Mm-hmm.
has like it's they really don't give you rules for making your own character other than like a
Right.
brief description because everything is just like we were doing a thing, something in like Oklahoma around like Broken Bow with the fall of Asgard or something. And they're just like, what do you want to play? And I'm like flipping through a book and I'm like, I'm fucking Domino. Deal with it.
Yep.
Like, isn't that
Fucking
lucky I found this? Ha ha.
Domino is one of my all-time favorite Marvel characters. My most favorite moment with Domino is in the new X-Men annual. Grant Morrison, best run of the X-Men in my opinion. Take it or leave it. I know it's hated, but I absolutely adore it. And they're trying to get through a door and she just punches in a bunch of numbers on the keypad and it opens and they're like, I didn't know you knew the keypad. She's like, oh no, that was my ex-boyfriend's phone number. I just fucking tried it and it worked.
Yeah,
It's
the
so
mechanics
fucking
handled
good.
that incredibly tenuous link between causal reality, like in the game. It worked really well.
Yeah.
Um, and then Mech Warrior Destiny by the same publisher, using the same rules, but letting you play Mech Warrior,
Hmm.
uh, which I will say, as an aside, brainworm I have after playing the newer BattleTech uh, computer game. It's not Mech Warrior. It's like turn-based overhead. The writing for that is phenomenal. It feels like Game of Thrones. Like
Mm.
but like in a universe where people walk around in 100-ton, like 5-story tall war machines. Um, and so it was just really cool. I would love to play a Mech Warrior game, and I picked up Mech Warrior Destiny, which is this, but for Mech
Mm-hmm.
Warrior.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
The aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
Are we there yet? I think we've talked about why it's cool throughout the whole episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Would
sorry. No, the thing it's missing.
okay.
I would have loved for there to be an example of play.
Mm.
That's
Right.
the especially when they're asking you to do something really different, like a two-page spread, like the dialogue of the players at the table that a lot of RPGs include. I don't need those in anything that's basically like a traditional RPG. And this, I really would have loved to have seen that.
Right. I didn't even realize that wasn't in this.
That's the thing I was looking for after my first read through back in the day. I was like, okay, well, I get the concept, but what does it actually look like?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Gotcha. So then what was your aha moment?
the aha moment was before I ever laid eyes on the book as someone said, "Oh, did you know they're doing a rules light Shadowrun?" I was like, "Aha!"
That's hilarious. Your aha moment was before you read the book. My aha moment occurred on this podcast, listening you talk about how you actually ran the game. I think that was my aha moment of just like, okay, this isn't just going to be an unmitigated fucking cocaine driven story nightmare of imagination fuel for Matty. Like that's how I really envisioned it. It was just like, I mean, like, look, I'm a straight white man. I'm already addicted to a false sense of confidence and entitlement and empowerment. So like I don't do coke. I never have. I'm scared to mess around with drugs. Uh
It's not one correction though. It's not false. It's unearned.
oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, it's a very real sense of all those things. I have it too. It's just we did nothing to earn that.
Sure, sure.
So it's a
Uh
pretty great deal. Like,
yeah, I just don't want to do a drug that looks like it simulates like more of that. Just like
yeah,
anyway, joke
yeah,
joke didn't land. Anyway,
that's fine. It's just like let's accelerate your white guyness by doing cocaine.
thank you. Yes,
Yes.
that's exactly what I wanted to say. So I kind of felt like this game would be that for my imagination and running a role playing game, and I think you kind of brought me back down. What you know what I'm saying? Like you brought me down from the high on it.
Yeah,
Joke is going nowhere.
I'm a real bring down though. That's my contribution to the podcast.
But that was my aha moment, was hearing you talk about it.
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, I think if you are someone that has been playing for a while, and I hope you see this when you run games that I play in, that I do encourage turn taking for other people, and I do try and toss the mic. If you've got people that are tossing the mic, that's fantastic. This is a great system for that. But if you have people who are just really into narrating the super cool thing their character does in this narration system, that also works. So if you have a mix of those people, it's actually not a problem for the game.
Right on. All
Well,
right.
yeah, Chip Truth, we did it.
Well, listener, if you're also addicted to story game magic, or maybe you don't like story games at all, you could write us if you wanted to. Uh, Jesse, how would they do that? I keep forgetting this every episode.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. Well, going back to it, I just want to say, like, while we owe you nothing, dear listener, you owe us an email at jauntymantis at gmail.com. Jauntymantis at gmail.com. Tell us why we are wrong,
Hmm. Keep it
but
brief.
oh, thank you. There we go.
Yeah. I thought that was, I didn't think that needed to be said.
When we wrap this season,
Hmm.
I think the first bonus episode that we need to record, we have actually a little bit of a stack up of people who have written us things, and we should probably do like a mailbag.
I agree. I only let's do that second. The first bonus episode I want to do is I want us to try again on that suggestion email we got. You know the person in real life. I don't remember their name, but they asked us for recommendations for games for new gamers or alternatives to D&D or whatever. And like,
Right.
I don't know where that episode is. We recorded an entire episode to answer this person's email. And like, I don't know where it is. It's gone. So I would like to try again, especially after we've gone through these books. And so if you don't mind, I'd like that to be our first bonus episode.
Okay. Cool, cool.
And, but, anyway,
My
how
point is,
many
dear listener, if you're out there and you've been like, I'm listening to these guys and I wrote them and they haven't talked about it, I know we're working on it and
That's
I'm very
Jesse's fault.
sorry. Thank you for writing. It's entirely my fault.
Jesse controls the email.
Yes, I do.
I don't know who's contacting us. I'm not connected to anything.
We have one that came in via text message and one that came in via email. We're not going to tell you random people on the internet how to text us. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, yeah. Jesse, before we go, how many mantises do you give Shadowrun Anarchy?
Oh, I would say I give this all the mantises.
All the mantises.
All
Wow.
the mantises.
Wow. No other book on the Jaunty Mantis, save for Velvet Generation, has gotten all the mantises.
Yes. How many
Wow.
mantises are you rating
Well,
Anarchy?
I was gonna also give it all the mantises.
Like it's okay. Well, I have a physical copy, so I'll just get a handful of mantises and we'll throw it at the book. And there we go. You've
Yeah,
been
for
rated.
sure. Yeah. Well, listener, hopefully you're not a dumb dumb like me, but until next time, get out there and catchphrase, slang, funny quip from Shadowrun.
Never trust an elf, never deal with a dragon, geek the mage first, slot and run chummers, play some role-playing games or some shit.
Hey, before we go, what is your favorite Shadowrun character that you've ever made?
Oh man. Oh man. Oh, it's so hard.
Maybe this should be a bonus episode.
I made a character that was basically Battle Angel Alita
Hmm.
for like a high school age game that I thought was super badass. Um, I think Lil Amsterdam
Hmm.
is I think we've talked about Lil Amsterdam on the
We
show before.
have. We definitely have. Uh,
Um, what was yours?
I made an orc who had a whole other life that he took a really bad injury to the head one day and woke up in a cardboard box, and he was able to use magic, and he had no idea that he had a whole family and a life somewhere else in the city, and it was actually right down the street.
Yeah.
And
His name was
yeah,
Shoebox. His catchphrase, there was a drawing of him that says, "Don't touch my box."
don't touch my
And
box.
he was not just an orc, he was the Oni
Oh,
meta
that's
variant.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
He was the Oni variant. Yeah,
From the player's companion book that had the variant meta humanity types.
that's right. That's right. So he was suffering from some horrible amnesia while discovering that he had magical powers. And even though we never got to it, there was a family waiting for him to come home, literally right around the corner from where his box was set up. Don't touch my box.
Oh, my elf technomancer detective that was obsessed with film noir movies. That's
That's
probably
right.
one of my favorite Shadowrun characters.
Whose character was it that had like he was a shaman and he had a spirit ally that was like that lived in a Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Oh, and he looked like the Planner's Peanut guy and he was made of fire, Mr. Pop.
That's what it was.
Yeah, it was a fire elemental bound spirit that looked like the Planter's Peanut guy, but made of fire that would just like come out of the Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that was my character. I can't remember the character's name now, but I remembered the Mr. Pop.
Yeah, Mr. Pop haunts my nightmares.
Yeah, he was a fiery one. You know, burned people alive a lot. So
Well, on that happy note, get out there and play some fucking Shadowrun Anarchy.
yeah, do. It's on drive through.
This meeting is no longer being recorded.